The Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, has anyone ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Raise your hand. Does anyone have no idea what the Dead Sea Scrolls are all about? Raise your hand. Yeah, like we might hear this term, like everyone's like, oh yeah, Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's like, why are these important? You know, I hear people talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So in Christian circles, there's a group of manuscripts called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, in 1947, a young shepherd boy was out watching his goats, and according to legend, there's two kind of legends I've heard. Either number one, he couldn't find his goat, which I find plausible, and he was out looking for it, and he came across this cave where these manuscripts were hidden. The other one is that he threw a piece of rock and he heard pottery shatter, and he goes, uh-oh, and then he checked it out. I also think that's plausible. In fact, they're probably both true in my estimation. Anyways, this young boy discovers this cave, and inside this cave, there are thousands of texts about the Old Testament and other Jewish writings. Now, this is very, very important because at the time, the oldest manuscript we had for the Old Testament in Hebrew was, watch this, from the 10th century AD. Not BC, AD. You said, Kyle, wasn't the Old Testament written in the BC time? Yeah, it was. And we only had a manuscript from the 10th century AD. Now, why is that? There's a group of scribes called the Masoretes. That's why we have the Masoretic text. And they had this practice. They would copy the book, make their new copy, and you know what they did with their old one? They burned it in the fire. Why would they do that? I guess someone was like worried that someone would check their work and then say, you messed up, you know. So they just burned the old one in the fire. Well, as Christians, how do we know the Bible is reliable? I mean, 10th century AD is a long time removed from when the books were actually written in the BC era. So we were really worried that, man, what if the Bible, as it's been copied all these years, is actually false and there's been mistakes and things interjected in it? But when we discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found every book of the Old Testament except for Esther. Now, the community, the Essenes, were a really like hardcore group of Jews who thought the world was going to end and they kind of condemned the world to hell. So the reason they might not have kept Esther is that Esther married a non-Jewish king. So that was a big no-no in their community. So that could have been the reason why they don't have Esther, but they don't have the book. Anyways, when we got to their scrolls and we looked at them, they were thousands of years older than what we had in the 10th century AD. And what was amazing, by the grace of God, is there was very, very little differences between those scrolls, which were in the BC era, to what we had in the 10th century AD. The scribes had faithfully copied the scroll for thousands of years. So that's why the Dead Sea Scrolls are so important. We know that the transmission of the text was reliable. But for the book of Daniel, it goes a step further. Remember, according to critical scholars, Daniel was written in 164 BC. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found 8 different manuscripts for the book of Daniel. One of them dates to the 2nd century BC. As one scholar joked, maybe we found the original, okay? And we know the manuscript is not the original. It's clearly a copy because it looks like the other texts that are in the cave with it. Similar printing, similar material, and so here's the issue. What if the manuscript we found in the Dead Sea Scrolls is actually older than 164 BC? The copy is older than the original. And even if it's not, now critical scholars say the manuscript should be dated to 120 BC based on the way that they write, which, as you could guess, is not the most precise of methods to determine dating. Think about how long it would take for this manuscript to get here. Here's what would need to have happened. So let's say, according to their theory, the book is written in 164 BC. At that time, it would need to be circulated in Jerusalem and affirmed by the religious authorities that, yes, this is inspired scripture by God, however long that process would take. And remember, they don't have the internet, they don't have the printing press, they don't have anything like that. So you are handwriting every copy. So here you got the book of Daniel, now you got to make copies. It's got to go out to all the religious leaders in Jerusalem, and they all have to affirm, yes, this is Holy Scripture. And after that, someone has to make additional copies, take them to the community at Qumran, and have the community in Qumran affirm them as scriptures. And all of this has to happen in about 40 years. That puts a great strain on the theories. And for other books of the Bible, like some chapters of Psalms, critical scholars say there's just not enough time for that. But they're not consistent with the book of Daniel. And the reason why is because if Daniel is before 164 BC, it supernaturally predicted the future.